Good morning.
Good morning.
It's particularly special to have the children involved. I've been to several church services in South Sudan, and the children are a large part of those services, so it just felt very special to have the children involved. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share this work that we're doing to improve maternal and infant health in the South Sudanese communities. I really appreciate your prayers, the words of encouragement, and the donations. And I want to start by saying that we always ask permission to take pictures before we take pictures of the women. And they always say, we want you to take our picture. We want you to share our stories and our pictures with your friends and family back home. So I'm going to be showing you some pictures, and I'm going to be telling you some of the stories of the many ones that I hear. So a bit about me. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a missionary kid, or an MK. That's me in the white dress with my two older sisters. And my parents were missionaries at a mission hospital in what is now the United Arab Emirates. And it was a very busy hospital, so they put us kids to work. And one of my first jobs was washing the newborn babies. And I was able to see my first birth when I was 8. And from that moment on, I knew that my life's work was to be a midwife. I've been a midwife for nearly 25 years. I've attended over about 2,000 births. 2 of those babies were my grandsons. And for the past 6 years, as Nancy mentioned, I've also been faculty in the midwifery graduate program at the University of Michigan School of Nursing. In 2013, I got an email from a gentleman by the name of John Musick. And some of you know John. He was a member of this community, lived in Kalamazoo, and he was a community organizer who had a great passion for the South Sudanese people. And John asked me if I would be interested in going to South Sudan to train traditional birth attendants. And he told me that the women there were asking for this, that they told him stories of women dying during pregnancy and childbirth. And as one woman told him, God's mercy, otherwise there is no help when we deliver. There is no way, nothing. So Sue Miller, who is a fellow certified nurse midwife and friend, and I went. And our plan was to teach home-based life-saving skills, which is a maternal child health curriculum designed for use in low-resource settings such as South Sudan. So where in the world is South Sudan? And I am not great at geography, so I actually had to look up where South Sudan was after I had already said yes to going. South Sudan is the newest country in the world. It gained its independence from Sudan in 2011 after decades of long, bloody civil war. In February 2013, it was just struggling to get on its feet with high rates of poverty, high rates of unemployment, and virtually no infrastructure. Pregnancy and childbirth in this area of the world is very risky. In South Sudan, a woman's risk of dying from pregnancy or childbirth is 45 times higher than it is in the developed world. 1 in 7 women in South Sudan will die in childbirth. I'm going to pause here for a moment because I think there's a very crucial point to be made. In the United States, maternal mortality rate has more than doubled in recent years. It is 3 times higher than in Canada, and it is 8 times higher than in Finland. We rank 55th in maternal and infant mortality rates. Women in the U.S. die from the same reasons they die in South Sudan. Lack of access to reproductive health services, and because they're not valued or listened to. So we have a lot to do in this country as well. And I have to apologize. I told Nancy that I was worried I was going to get emotional, and Nancy said, that's okay. So I blame you, Nancy, when I have to regroup here. Home-based life-saving skills is designed to do in small groups, so we limited our first class to 12. It's very reliant on active participation, and it's also completely picture-based, and this is extremely important in this community because less than 15% of adult women in South Sudan are literate. The curriculum focuses on preventing problems, problem recognition, and agreeing on solutions to those problems during pregnancy, childbirth, and after birth. And after each workshop, the women get their own booklet of take action cards with picture depictions of the actions to take if there's a problem. We tell stories and we hear many stories about women dying in childbirth and many more about babies dying. Stories like this one are told in every meeting, and this is a quote from a woman. A neighbor married very young and got pregnant. We live in a village very far from the hospital. When she delivered, there was serious bleeding. I tried to stop it, but I was unable. There was no medical care. The bleeding continued until the mother died. The baby was healthy. That situation was a bad experience for me, so this training is very important. These workshops are about sharing knowledge and affirming what these women already know. They've been much harder for me than I imagined for reasons I did not anticipate. These women are smart. They know what they need, and they know they don't have it. To quote one woman, "We don't have what we need. We don't have medicines. We don't have machines to listen to the heartbeat. We don't have gloves. What can you say or do that is meaningful in any way to these women?" And in that moment, my response to them was, if one of my daughters was having a baby, I would trust you more than any of the technology that I have back in the United States. Issues such as poverty, food scarcity, and lack of health care are problems we can't solve. As one participant said, we can't tell women to eat more if they don't have it, if there is no food. Nevertheless, that first training in Kear's Village was a success, with 12 women completing the workshop and making plans for how they could better care for women and babies with what little they had. They organized and they named their organization Negrathial, which in Dinka means hope for the future. Unfortunately, very shortly after that first trip, war broke out once again in South Sudan. Kear Village was at the epicenter and is now completely gone. Current estimates are that 400,000 have been killed in the violence, and more than 4 million have had to flee their homes. South Sudan is currently considered the most dangerous place in the world for health aid workers. More than 1 million South Sudanese are now living in refugee camps in northern Uganda. So in 2015, we headed out again, and this time we went to northern Uganda, where we've been conducting similar workshops in refugee camps surrounding the town of Adjumani. There we've learned women face many of the same problems: lack of nutrition, lack of quality health care, and extreme poverty. But there are also new problems. Many women have experienced rape and physical violence as they've fled South Sudan, and gender-based violence in the camps is very prevalent. While some of the refugee camps have health facilities, there's a strong mistrust of those facilities. There's major shortages of medicines, staff, and supplies. For these reasons, these workshops are so important. As more than one woman has said, others promise to come back, but you do. It is God that brings you back to us. To date, we've facilitated 10 workshops with over 100 women participating, with plans to return this January. I've had the great privilege of involving midwifery graduate students. To date, 22 University of Michigan students have used their own precious funds and time to travel to Uganda and participate. They've also helped to improve the training and expand it to adolescents, and this year we're implementing a men's health workshop. Some of those who've participated or are planning to participate are here this morning, So if you wouldn't mind standing so people can perhaps have a chance to talk to you afterward. To quote one student, "In school we learn critical thinking, but here you learn creative thinking because these women are so used to working with nothing." So the project really centers around community education, around maternal and infant health, because education is something that can never be taken away. But it would be foolish to ignore the lack of basic items needed for a clean and safe birth. So each of us bring at least 2 suitcases, one with our own things, and the other one's filled with supplies that are donated that we then augment with things purchased there so that we can make mama kits that are shared with pregnant women in the refugee camps. These kits contain simple items like basins, clean clothes, blankets, gloves, and soap. We've learned that women are shamed when they arrive at the health facilities without needed supplies, so these items are cherished. Students have the opportunity to work in the health facilities where the midwifery interns work alongside and learn from the Ugandan midwives and physicians, hopefully easing the staff's burden in their insanely busy schedules. To quote a student, "There are the big things that we as Americans know we take for granted, but then there are the little things, the stuff that is always just there that we never even think twice about having access to. It wasn't until a baby came out blue and floppy, clearly needing resuscitation, and I'm struggling to tie the bands of my gloves around the umbilical cord with slippery hands, that I realized how much I take a simple cord clamp for granted." For me personally, this endeavor doesn't come out of any sort of altruism, and it doesn't come from self-sacrifice. I do it because I love it. And it's the generosity and support of people like Dick Knapp, the First United Methodist Women, the First Sowers, and others here in this congregation that make it possible. And for that, I am so grateful.